Did we just witness the best week of the entire NFL season? By my count, there were 9 games that finished within one score, and we had a ton of points scored. We had possibly the best game of the year in the Bears Bengals, and we even saw NFL history being made, although it was by a kicker, so I'm not sure if that should even count. And yet, if you had guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, Romo Dunze, and Pat Mahomes in your lineup, you're like, that weekend sucked. But that's how fantasy football is, right? You care about your players on your team. Well, every week can't be yours, but let's look ahead to week 10 and figure out what to do to get another win because, there are more injuries to discuss. There are more players that need to be picked up. First off, I'm going to ask you a big favor. Actually, it's just a small favor. It takes 1 second. Click the subscribe button. Help us get to 100K. We are on the way. Our goal is to get there by the end of the season. We want you to help us and be a part of it. All injuries are bad, but when it came to week 9, apparently it saved the worst for last. Not only the worst looking injury, and look, I'm not squeamish anyway. They say don't look if you don't like to see a graphic images. This one was ugly, right? Jaden Daniels at the very, very, very end of that Sunday night blowout loss, which of course led to questions about why was he still in the game in the first place. And then he scrambled, and then that left elbow bent the opposite way of where it's supposed to bend. So this sounds like an elbow dislocation, and so we don't know. It doesn't sound like it's not his throwing arm. That's a good thing. And there's some speculation, like Dr. David Chow thinks it might not even be season ending, but needless to say, he's going to be out for a while. So just a huge blow for a team that already now looks like its playoff chances are disappearing, and now the quarterback, Jaden Daniels, who had been already gone for a couple games, out with another injury. This might affect the rest of the season for the whole Washington offense. It's Marcus Mariota again in Washington. As far as what to do with the pass catchers, this is going to really heavily depend on the matchups. Tucker Kraft came into this week as the number 3 tight end in PPR scoring, and you were just counting on him to have another big game in this matchup. And he could have, except he went out. You saw it's a serious injury. Immediately, Matt LaFleur after the game said it, quote, doesn't look good. Yeah, it could be the dreaded ACL. And so we'll confirm this most likely on Monday or Tuesday. But just be prepared. If you've been rolling with Tucker Kraft and you've been loving it, you're going to have to now pivot to plan B. Like Luke Musgrave is a guy who, you might forget, was actually drafted before Tucker Kraft in that same class a couple years ago, just hasn't quite broken through. He's going to get his chance now, so he's not a bad option. I am, of course, going to talk about some other Packers later on because he wasn't the only one who got injured. Also, rookie Matthew Golden, who were just looking for him to get more opportunities. Well, he left with a shoulder injury. Not sure the severity of this one, but if he's going to miss time, then yeah, this opens up a lot of targets for some other receivers here. At the very end of that Bengals game, we saw T. Higgins, after having a monster game himself, right when they were driving down the field there, there's some sort of injury. Couldn't tell what it was. Looked like a head injury. So I haven't heard anything, as of Sunday night, exactly what's going on here. We're just going to have to wait and see. But the good news is that the Bengals are on bye next week, so hopefully this winds up really not mattering. I know some of you out there just want Brian Thomas Jr. to not matter anymore. Just done with this guy. And look, part of the reason why he didn't put up a big game even without Travis Hunter here against the Raiders is because he also left this game early with an ankle injury. Suspect it might be a high ankle. If so, he might join Hunter on the shelf for a while. But again, I'm just speculating here. I don't know. We'll find out throughout the week. So you might have a really good reason to bench BTJ, but let's see what happens here. And young receiver Kayshon Boutte in that New England game left very early with a hamstring injury. This is going to be one to monitor. He had become a semi-reliable flex option here on a weekly basis, so let's see if he's going to miss any time. Aaron Jones was having himself a pretty good game, but he left with a shoulder injury. This guy can't catch a break. It's an AC joint sprain. Now, he played it off, says that he thinks he'll play next week. Doesn't sound serious, so probably won't have to miss any time here. May not be the case for CJ Stroud, and you saw that hit he took. He was motionless on the field for a short time, and then, of course, concussion protocol. You know how this goes. Maybe he'll play this week. There's a decent chance he doesn't. That means it's Davis Mills at quarterback. And also in that Bears-Bengals game, I'm going to talk about Colston Loveland in a little bit, but a lot of the reason why he did go off, not just that one big play at the end, but Cole Kmet left that game early as well. And so that definitely means more snaps for Loveland. For Kmet, it's concussion. So same thing I said about Stroud. Chance he plays next week, but it's going to be up in the air up until probably the weekend. All right, now for the waiver wire ads, let's start with your more high priority ads, but also the ones you're less likely to get. These are more highly owned across fantasy leagues. And yeah, it's going to be a bear, Kyle Monangai. I was joking, but not really, that we got about 862 questions about Kyle Monangai just on Saturday. And we got a fair amount on Sunday too. I'm glad because this tells me that you all have been listening the last couple of weeks when I've been saying to pick up Kyle Monangai. I've been saying this even before the Swift injury. I mean, Swift has been banged up. He had missed some time with a groin issue. Didn't think he would miss this week's game because he didn't miss last week's game. Apparently that wasn't to be the case, but we didn't know Monangai was going to be the starter and basically the only guy here in the backfield until the end of the week, like Friday. The reason why you should have been picking up Monangai, as I've been saying, is he had already been working himself into a role here ever since the Bears were on bye, right? After week 4, they have been running the ball, trying to establish the run, and it's been working. They've been able to run the ball, and DeAndre Swift has been the lead back, but Monangai has really been creeping towards that 1B kind of role here, and then of course with Swift out, it was just such a smash spot. I hope you started him, like we said, yes to almost, universally. Here's the thing, right? Great game. It was the Bengals run defense, which is the worst in the NFL, right? So he's not going to do this every week. But also, look, Swift may come back next week, right? There's a good chance. This was not like some serious injury. It's just been kind of like nagging at him. But this is why I've been saying pick up Monangai anyways, because he will still have a role. And I bet you after this week, he's definitely earned himself the right to at least keep the role he already had, if not even get more touches. And it's not even a bad matchup next week either against that Giants run defense. And so, look, whether Swift is good or not, Monangai is a guy now you could feel at least good enough to flex, and obviously the potential for more. Now, if you watched the weekly stash video last week, I said, okay, it's time to get Trey Benson. He's on the way back. You don't have to fight, and spend your fab and use your waiver claims to try to get him. Well, if you didn't do that, or maybe you couldn't stash him, whatever the case is, now it's time to pick up Trey Benson. Now, just to be clear, again, we're very early in the week. I can't say with 100% certainty he is being activated. He's going to play. He's going to be the lead back and all that. This is a presumption, but again, he should be ready. And even if it's not this week, or even if they ease him back into action, whatever the case is, he's going to be the number 1 back there. So everything I already said on that other video last week still applies. He was running well. He's got the opportunity. They're not going to try to force Bam Knight or Michael Carter into a role. Those guys are there because Trey Benson has been hurt. And speaking of hurt, as I mentioned, Tucker Kraft done, looks like for the season. And then Matthew Golden, don't know exactly his status, based on that shoulder injury. So what we saw is it's just good old Romeo Doubs again. He led the team in targets, led the team in receptions, 7 catches, 91 yards, didn't score. And that's kind of the thing with all these Packers receivers. Josh Jacobs is always going to score a touchdown. There's not always enough left for multiple guys here. Although, again, Kraft had been a pretty big red zone threat. Dobbs has scored. He usually does get a high amount of red zone looks. Last year, he was their top red zone getter when Christian Watson wasn't on the field. So, look, Romeo Doubs is not the most exciting, but I got to tell you, he's going to be probably the leading target in that Packers offense. But what about Christian Watson? Hey, I think you should pick him up too, because again, there's more targets available here with those 2 injuries, but also, look, Christian Watson has been pretty much a full go since coming back from injury. They haven't eased him into action, right? He's getting targets. Now, this past week against the Panthers, no, he didn't do so much. In fact, took a step back after his debut where he led the team in receiving. He had that one long catch, that 52-yard catch. It wasn't a touchdown, but it was a deep shot. And that's the thing with Watson. And this is what makes him so tantalizing, but also so frustrating. He is volatile. He'll get those long, right, deep shots. He'll score some touchdowns, but sometimes he'll do nothing. It's just the way it is. That's just, that's how they use him. And they're going to continue to use him that way, right? He's not going to be a target hog ever. But Jordan Love likes to look for him in the red zone when they get there. They just didn't do it too much here in week 9. And he does have that big play ability always in his pocket. So, yeah, I think you look for upside, right? You're always wanting upside. Christian Watson, has it. Coming off a very disappointing showing on offense against the Panthers, well, the Pack, they get a Monday night game against the Eagles. not exactly a great matchup for them with that defense there, but they're going to have to keep the foot on the gas pedal and probably throw it a lot more than they want to. So there's that. Now it's funny because I would have talked about Parker Washington as a pickup, even if BTJ didn't get hurt in this game, because we already know Travis Hunter is out. Parker Washington definitely was going to step up and have a big role here. Sure enough, he did. He led the team, 8 catches on 90 yards, 9 targets, definitely leading the Jags here. It's just a little frustrating that he doesn't get any red zone looks because when they get close to the goal line, they're running it. Trevor Lawrence is running it himself. That aside, Parker Washington is one of those guys in PPR who's going to give you a high floor, right? Because he will get peppered with those short and intermediate targets. You know, you like Wan'Dale Robinson? Well, here you go. Parker Washington is kind of the same guy. So it's very different. In fact, he's kind of the opposite type of receiver from Christian Watson, right? Very boom bust, gets those big plays or nothing. And Parker Washington, the opposite, he's going to get definitely several receptions per game because he gets a lot of targets, just doesn't have the big play, doesn't have the touchdown in him every week. So I usually don't push too hard for a guy who I'd say is more of a floor play at receiver. But in this case, it's a high floor. And hey, there is also the potential for more because what if BTJ does miss a game, 2 games? Remember, Brenton Strange is also already out on IR, the tight end. They're missing so much there. And I think I heard De'Ami Brown is hurt too. Yeah, Parker Washington is definitely going to get enough action. He is fantasy relevant. All right, now finally it has become obvious that rookie tight end Colston Loveland is more than relevant. I mean, you saw that highlight play to win the game at the end there, but look, it wasn't just that long touchdown on the missed tackle in the Bengals defense. I mean, he was going off anyways. So all told, this game, 6 catches, 118 yards, and 2 scores. Now, we also could say we saw this coming because it is the Bengals defense and not just the run defense that is horrific, but remember, they have for now 2 years running been the absolute worst by far to tight ends. This is why I mentioned Colston Loveland a couple of weeks ago and this matchup specifically. The issue has been Cole Kmet, right? When he's there, he eats into his snaps. Remember when I said Cole Kmet left this game early? Yeah. Look, I don't know if Kmet's going to miss this coming week or not, but if so, I mean, the way Loveland has already been trending up in terms of his snap share and now his targets and then showing off his big playmaking ability, yeah, you want to try to fire up Colston Loveland if you can. And if you can't get Loveland at tight end, you know what? It's actually not a bad idea to go back to Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson is a guy who started out looking like he might be a league winner. That came crashing down, and he was absolutely invisible for a couple weeks. Slowly regaining a foothold here in that Saints offense, now run by Tyler Shook. Look, the offense itself doesn't look much better, but Juwan Johnson, the past 2 weeks, had 15 total targets, 5 catches in each. Week 9, not so great, only 3 catches, 31 yards, but he did score a touchdown. He's going to get some red zone looks. The other thing here, though, is if you do have the waivers that run by Tuesday, this is a trade deadline, and let's wait and see exactly what happens. A lot of smoke around the Saints, wondering, is Olave, Rashid Shaheed, maybe even Kamara, these guys going to be on the move? I doubt seriously that Chris Olave gets traded. They're saying they, in fact, want to keep and extend him. Rashid Shaheed, I wouldn't be surprised if he does get traded. That could open up some targets. More likely, Brandon Cooks will just get traded for a 7th round pick. But either way, I think we're going to continue to see more opportunities for Juwan Johnson the remainder of the season. And even if Shook doesn't look like the guy right now, keep in mind his first NFL start, he's going to need a little time. He might actually get better as the season goes on. Now, I was not convinced that JJ McCarthy was going to be the guy. And, I mean, he looked the part early in that game, week 9. He was moving the team down the field, scored an early touchdown. Now, the numbers at the end of the day were not overwhelming. In fact, only 143 passing yards, but he threw a couple touchdowns and he ran for one. And that definitely gives him some more intrigue in fantasy leagues. And look, let's face it, they got off to an early lead, wound up beating the Lions, and so they didn't have to pass as much. And the running game was actually working pretty well too. So all told, game script kind of played a part in the fact that he didn't have a lot of passing yards. But I mean, this offense, you just put any quarterback in this Vikings offense under Kevin O'Connell, it's just going to function, and that quarterback has value. We've seen it over and over throughout the year. So even if you don't think McCarthy is a franchise quarterback, it almost doesn't matter. He's got Justin Jefferson out there. He's got Jordan Addison over here. He's got a great play caller. He's going to thrive. Moreover, I'm willing to buy into McCarthy as a streamer for this week because going to go home and face the Ravens. Now, the Ravens defense has been better the last couple of weeks. They've gotten some players back from injury, but it's still not a clamped down pass defense, let's face it. So better, not nearly as bad as they were early in the season. But yeah, McCarthy could definitely put up some points. And look, with that offense got Lamar Jackson back, they're going to have to keep pace. Another pretty good option at quarterback who, look, let's just face it, he's always going to be a streaming option for your single quarterback leagues. It's Jackson Dart. Now, the last couple of weeks, we've been off Jackson Dart because of the matchups, and he's just put up decent, not great numbers, but he always has the rushing floor. And here we go, we saw it again. He's another player that didn't put up a lot of passing yardage in this game against the Niners, but 56 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, and he did throw for 2 touchdowns. Now, granted, a lot of that did come basically in garbage time, right? Late in the game, they were behind big. Who cares, right? It's points. Fantasy points. Doesn't matter if it's the first quarter or fourth quarter. It still counts. But this week, Dart gets what should be a very favorable matchup. Going to face the Bears. Yeah, that defense that just gave up almost 500 yards passing to Joe Flacco. So I'm pretty sure Jackson Dart, even if he doesn't have a monster game, can do something in the air, and yes, he's still also going to run all over them. The Bears have given up now the 4th most fantasy points per game to the quarterback position and the 2nd most yards per attempt. We can only imagine what this offense and what Jackson Dart's numbers might look like with a guy like Malik Neighbors. We'll have to wait a while to find out, but still, in this matchup, Dart, very high floor. Now let's get a little bit deeper here. A name that might now resurface and have some value, Demario Douglas of the Patriots. Now, there have been several players in that offense that you're not sure on a given week whether you should trust them or not. And the answer is no, you should never trust anybody in Josh McDaniels' offense fully. But remember I said Kayshon Boutte with a hamstring injury, he left very early in that game, and it was Pop Douglas who benefited. I mean, he had that one long score, but also wound up with a 100-yard game on just 4 catches. And just a side note, it was great to see that because he had the personal story that he had shared. He was very motivated because just the day before his uncle had died. I mean, Pop is one of those guys, like a glue guy. He's always there and doesn't ask for the ball a lot. He doesn't get the ball a lot on certain weeks, but he's always showing up when the team needs him. Look, they might need him a lot more next week, not just if Boutte is out, but they're going to get the Tampa Bay Bucks coming off a bye. This could turn into an absolute shootout between May and Mayfield. And so just keep an eye on Douglas. He might be a very high upside flex option. And then let me throw out a stash. I know I usually talk about this on like the Beat the Breakout video, but I did already talk about Isaiah Davis. And look, I don't want to get too heavy into what if this guy gets traded, because most of the time they don't. But if Breece Hall does move, you want to get Isaiah Davis. So this is the time. He actually did a little bit of something in their last game before the bye when the Jets offense actually looked like an NFL offense. In that game week 8 against the Bengals, 7 carries, 65 yards, but also caught 5 passes for 44 yards. So we're talking over 100 scrimmage yards. Now, yes, you did hear right. It was the Bengals. So of course, take it with a grain of salt. But still, look, Isaiah Davis will have a role as a pass catcher, even if Breece Hall sticks around, as I expect him to. He's going to be the backup, and that means he's a high-end handcuff if something does happen to Breece. So I think he's probably your smartest stash here as far as running backs go. If you want to know who to start in your fantasy lineup for Week 10, we're going to go through every position. We got you covered as far as start, sit advice, and more. Everything is going to be in this week's playlist.